All right, so welcome to the Application Kickoff. This is our 2018 kickoff. That's really our 2020 kickoff. So I'm sorry, I don't know why that says that. Anyway, welcome. We're really glad you're here. We're really excited to have you at this point. We know that applying to medical and dental and veterinary and optometry and podiatry school is a little bit of a stressful process, but it's also a really exciting process. So we're really glad that you're here and you're joining us. And we want you to know we're going to walk you through this process step by step so that although it seems kind of big and daunting now, we're going to get to that final goal together. And we do have plenty of time to get all of our different pieces in. So right now you're just looking at the welcome to the application kickoff of the wrong year, but it is meant to be for the right year. But in a year from now, we're going to be applying, and 2 years from now, you'll be hopefully matriculated at your school. So, oh, here we go. Here's just a little snapshot for you to kind of feel positive about some of our successful students. And actually, most of these MD students are folks who just matriculated in August into medical programs. So you can see that it is possible. All of these folks have been successful, and you too can be successful. So this is definitely, it's a lot of work, but it's also something that's achievable. So let's start with our agenda for today. For the on-ground presentation, we did have a student panel. Obviously, we don't have a student panel with us here for the virtual session, but when I send out the announcements, when I send out the slides and the link, I'm going to send the notes that Sarah was able to take notes from the question. So I will send out Sarah's notes from the applicants. We're going to talk a lot about making sure you're picking the correct year to apply, using data and reflection for self-assessment, talking about gap years, letters of recommendation, the value of applying early, and all the best ways to get help. So, the wisdom of current students, that'll be something we'll learn from the email. So, what do applicants say? So every year after our application cycle, we do a survey of the students, and this is what we've found from previous students. So previous students have typically said that, this is sort of a composite. This is not individual answers, but the greatest strength of applications, people feel, is the research experience, and that's something that we consistently see, is that the research experience that you guys have is head and shoulders above what a lot of other applicants are able to apply with. The greatest weakness that a lot of applicants feel they're applying with is GPA and exam scores, and that's something to really take note of. GPA, at this point, you have what you have so far. Sometimes people feel like, I could just get my GPA up a little bit more. And sometimes that means, applying at the end of the senior year and taking a gap year. Exam scores, though, for most of you guys, you haven't taken your entrance exam, and that really means being mindful in thinking about entrance exam planning. We are really excited that this year we have a current applicant who's interested in doing some MCAT prep teaching, and so it looks like we're going to have some MCAT prep classes. There'll be group lectures, and so more information will be coming about that, but that's going to be something that we think will be really helpful for you guys. The student who's teaching did quite well on the exam, and so we think he's got a lot of good stuff to share with you guys. We also ask applicants, what do they think was the most valuable peer health advising program or pre-health advising program resource? And by and large, folks say that personal advising and these workshops have been the most important thing. And so we do definitely encourage you to take advantage of these services. Feel free to set up an appointment with myself or Sierra or Dr. Hughes. And definitely come to the workshops. If you can't come in person or the virtual session, then at least watch the recordings. Okay, so we're going to talk next about some self-assessment and some self-reflection. It is a really long application process and it's expensive. It's time consuming and it's stressful. So one of the first things that you want to do is really make sure that you're focusing on doing this only once, applying in the best year for you, and just making sure that when you submit that application, you're completely ready, because that's something that's a very important piece of your application. A lot of students do take gap years. That doesn't mean that you need to take a gap year. 25% of Northeastern students apply to go direct. 75% take at least one gap year. Are you one of those 25%? You very well may be. And the acceptance rate for the folks who apply to go direct is pretty much exactly the same as for people who take a gap year. So if you are thinking, I really want to go direct, I think I'm ready, that's great. If you're thinking, I want to take a gap year, that's great too. What's really important though is you do that self-assessment and that reflection, because it is a long process, it is expensive, and it's very stressful. And like I said, you want to make sure that you're going into that application with a complete confidence in yourself that you've done everything that you could do. To this effect, to this end, we have put together a self-assessment, and our first deadline that we have for you is January 31st. We require a self-assessment and an applicant agreement. And those you can access through your medical applicant portal. We really recommend going online now to the medical applicant portal and downloading the self-assessment and really looking it over. It's October now, you aren't applying until June. So if you look the self-assessment over and you're like, oh, actually, I kind of wish that I had a little bit more clinical experience. Well, you have time between now and October to get that experience. Um, so, you do still have time to address anything that you feel like is a shortcoming. If you're like, well, I really know I need to study for the MCAT a lot, I don't have any research experience, and I don't know who's going to write my clinical letter, then you start thinking, well, is this the best year to apply? Anyway, so the self-assessment and the applicant agreement are due January 31st. You could throw it together the night before. It's about 17 pages long. You won't, because we know you're planning ahead and you want to make sure to save time, money, and stress, get a great committee letter, make your application writing process less painful, and have great tools for interview prep. So the self-assessment that we put together, we know it's very long and we do apologize for that, but what it does is it looks at everything that the admissions committees are going to look at when they're reviewing your application and all the things that they're going to be looking for. So you can already think through them and think about, what have I done? Not just what did I do in a checkbox format, but what did I learn from it? How is that going to help me to be a better doctor? And so really spending that time in self-reflection now is going to help you putting together your application. And in addition, it's going to help you when you go to those interviews. Now, you'll notice the date on that. It's due January 31st. For those of you who are taking a January MCAT, just a cautionary point, the last thing you're going to want to do in January when you're studying for the MCAT is put together your self-assessment. So I really recommend focusing on that a little bit now, so that you're not dividing your time between studying for the MCAT and the self-assessment. We also do require everything in your medical applicant portal be filled out by April 15th. So for April test takers, we recommend really filling out your medical applicant portal before April. Don't put that off to the last minute. We're going to be doing an update on the medical applicant portal tomorrow. So for those of you who look into your medical applicant portal and you're like, why is my GPA not up to date? It's going to be up to date after tomorrow. So we're very excited about that getting fixed. So what are the most common mistakes that people make in applications that prevent them from getting accepted? The most common mistake that people make, few of them, applying now when the data tells you to wait. You guys are scientists. You look at data all the time in your research. When you look at something and you're like, the odds on this are not good, you want to really make conclusions from that. Now, waiting does not mean not doing it, right? Waiting does not equal don't do it. It just means take the time to make sure that your application is in the best possible shape and that you're the best possible candidate that you can be. Another thing that we see applicants do is sitting for admissions exam before they're fully prepared. So you really want to think about first take all of the required classes, then study for 4 to 6 months, excuse me, then take the entrance exam. So do not just take the entrance exam to see what happens. Instead, what you're going to do, again, this is all just like what scientists do. You're going to make a data-driven decision. So you're going to take some practice tests. When your practice tests are a couple points above the score that your target score, then you're going to take the entrance exam. So it's a little tricky because, for example, registration for the MCAT is going to be at some point later in October, and we don't know that day yet, but we'll send out emails when we do hear that, and you can also follow AAMC on Twitter. The DAT you can sign up for through your Dentapin account, and they are offered more frequently, and same with the GRE, it's offered more frequently. So it is a little bit tricky because you do have to sign up, particularly for the MCAT, you have to sign up for it well in advance, and so you don't necessarily know. But if you're getting close to that test taking time and you're not scoring where you want to, it's better to move your test than to take it and not do well. The schools like to see you take it once, knock it out of the ballpark, and be done. People do wind up taking it more than once, and they do fine. But this next bullet point, taking the admissions exam twice in the same cycle. Now, that doesn't mean January and May. That means if you take it in April and you're not happy with the score and taking it again in June, that's not enough time to correct whatever went wrong on the exam. So if you didn't do well because you knew all the information, but you had a really bad test day, you were sick, which does sometimes happen. In that case, maybe you can take the exam again. But typically, if you didn't do well on the exam, it's because you didn't know the material well enough, and you really need to spend, 2, 3, 4 months studying again to really make sure that you know the exam. And that's something that we're happy to talk with you about and kind of help you plan and strategize um, in terms of thinking about when you want to retake the test. And then applying late is a really big mistake. This every year it seems like they're moving these the admissions committees are meeting sooner and earlier. And so you really want to make sure that you're applying early, because once they start giving out those interviews, they have a finite number of interview seats, and once they've offered them to people, then that's it. Those seats are gone. So you can be the best applicant in the world, but if they only have like 20 interview seats left, they're going to be very thoughtful about who they give those seats to. So it is really important to apply early. All right, so most medical students have taken one or more gap years. Most Northeastern students do too. You can see this is the 2018 MD applicants by year of graduation. So the group that goes direct is only about 24%. Our largest group typically is the group that takes one gap year, so they apply right after their senior year. But we have a lot of folks do wind up taking 2 gap years. In fact, the group that goes direct and takes 2 gap years is about the same size. And a lot of the time that's about employers wanting a 2-year commitment. So you may get a better job during that gap year if you take 2 gap years. And then some people are taking 3 and 4. Every year they publish data on who the oldest student entering medical school is, and this year I think that the person was like 49. So we're not advocating for you taking 20 gap years, but definitely be open to taking gap years if that's something that seems like it's going to work for you. Don't be thinking, okay, I have to go directly just because it's going to take me a long time in school. Life doesn't stop when you're in medical school or when you're in dental school. So definitely make decisions based on that evidence and what you feel kind of your needs are. So in terms of letters, this is particularly important for folks for medical, dental, and podiatry school. There are sort of 3 different ways to package your letters. So hopefully most of you have now heard of the committee letter. So the committee letter comes from our program. We also do something called a letter packet, which also comes through our program. And then you can also just apply with individual letters. And I'll talk a little bit more about what those requirements are. Oh, no, we'll talk about them right now, won't we? So a committee letter is a letter that meets our requirements. So we have very strict requirements for those committee letters. So we require 3 letters of recommendation from faculty, 2 science, a 3rd-year choice. We require a letter from a practitioner in the field. So an MD letter for MD applicants, a DO letter for DO applicants, a dental letter for dental applicants, etc. And then we allow up to 2 additional letters. Most people are going to get a research letter, and then maybe they'll have a 6th letter from either another research PI or a community service, a co-op supervisor, etc. So that package of letters is required for a committee letter or a letter packet. The difference between a committee letter and a letter packet is that the pre-health program writes a letter for you for the committee letters. For the letter packets, we don't write a letter, we just do a cover sheet. So committee letter recipients must meet every deadline that we have. If you miss a deadline, you can still qualify for a letter packet. So that is sort of our backup option. We really strongly recommend meeting our deadlines and getting a committee letter because that is what most of the schools are looking for. If you don't have the full set of 4 letters, the 3 faculty letters and the clinical letter, we won't send those letters to the schools. Instead, you should just request the letters be forwarded to the programs directly by your letter writers. So is a committee letter for me? You should ask yourself a couple questions. Am I a dental, DO, or MD, or podiatry applicant? Am I a current student or recent alumni? And by recent alumni, we mean, did you graduate within the last 3 years? If you answer yes to both questions, then you do want a committee letter. Am I a optometry or veterinary applicant? Have I graduated? There's a missing question here. Did I graduate more than 3 years ago? If you graduated more than 3 years ago, or if you're an optometry or veterinary applicant, you actually don't need a committee letter. Optometry and veterinary schools don't require them. For folks who graduated a while ago, you're sort of considered a non-traditional applicant, and a lot of the time people will decide not to have a committee letter because the sort of specific requirements that we have of 3 faculty letters and 3 external letters may no longer be the best way to package your qualifications. You may feel like, I don't know, it might be better to have 2 faculty letters and 4 external letters instead. And the schools typically don't have a problem with that. Are you confused about letters? Well, fortunately, we have detailed requirements on the website. You will have to fill out an applicant agreement. So our first deadline for January 31st is the self-assessment and an applicant agreement. The applicant agreement is very short. It just involves checking off a bunch of boxes. Now, you could just check off those boxes, imagining you were agreeing to things on Amazon when you're setting up your account, but you're not going to do that. You're going to instead read all of those things because we spell out all our deadlines and requirements in there, and we are really strict about those deadlines and requirements. If you miss those deadlines and requirements, we don't make exceptions for committee letters. So if you miss them, you wind up with a letter packet. So you really want to read those and make sure to note all the deadlines and requirements. You also want to attend the letters workshop, and we'll talk a little bit more about letter requirements. All right, let's talk about application timing. So this is data from the last 3 years. When did people apply and how successful were they in terms of acceptance? And if you look at this, you can really see June is a really good time to apply. July, we still have a fair amount of success. After July, though, things are not as good for acceptance. I mean, you got that person in October. I wouldn't, if it was me applying, I would not want to put my odds on that, right? I would be thinking, okay, June, that's definitely the best thing. There are a lot of things that are out of your control in this process. Hitting send in June is in your control. It's easy to make sure you have everything done. Everything we do is to help you get your stuff in June. And so you really want to make sure to take advantage of that because that's an important part of your application and it's something that you can control now. So definitely make sure just to put down June and think of June as the time that you're applying. So are you confused about what you need to do and when? No worries. So read the detailed requirements on the website, review the applicant agreement. Also, in 2 weeks, 2 weeks? Next week. I'll send that out in our next email when our next workshop is. We will have a timeline workshop, and we're going to talk about everything from when from now through when you matriculate. So we'll talk about everything you need for committee letters. We'll talk about the application itself, secondaries, interviewing. We'll talk a little bit about when you're going to spend a lot of money, which will be June and July, and then, flying to interviews. So that's when you need to be saving a fair amount of money. So we'll talk about all of those little details. Well, they're not little details, all those details at the timeline. So I definitely recommend if you can't come to one of those sessions, watch the video on that one as well. Are you feeling a little unsure about everything? No worries. Work on your self-assessment, make an appointment. Feel free to make an appointment with us even if you haven't finished your self-assessment. I definitely recommend taking a look over that self-assessment, but feel free to come in and, set up a time to meet with us at any point. If you no longer have access to your My Northeastern, just send us an email. Sierra does appointments starting at 8 a.m., so she can also meet with people before work. It is a complicated process. We recognize that. We recognize it's stressful. That's why we're here for you. Please do take advantage of all the things we have to offer. We have the workshop series. Sierra this year will also be offering a wellness series, and I definitely recommend, particularly if you're somebody who finds things anxiety provoking. We're going to have some yoga, and that's actually coming up pretty soon. We're also going to have just a general information session, a kickoff on that. We'll have some meditation. So we'll have a bunch of different events. In the spring, we're going to have some really great offerings right here in the pre-health program where you can, sit down with other people who are in the same position and feeling the same stress and pressure. Because sometimes it's hard when your friends are all like, ooh, yeah, my last semester, life is good, and you're really stressed out about things. So just as a chance to kind of talk it through and, feel feel what you're feeling and realize it's normal to feel that way. So just a reminder, these resources are available. We have some really wonderful alumni who we connect you with when you're interviewing at a school. We do go through your personal statements with you. We do mock interviews. So definitely feel free to schedule time to meet with us about these things. This is what we're here for. And we do this with folks, whether you're getting a committee letter or not. If you miss a deadline and you are required to get a letter packet, it doesn't mean we are unwilling to help you with everything else. It just means you missed a deadline, unfortunately, and we do have to have deadlines. Otherwise, we can never get everybody applied and with committee letters in the timeline that the schools are really looking for. We still love you, so still feel free to set up times to meet with us. If you're not getting a committee letter or letter packet, you're still welcome to come in and meet with us. So questions, anybody? If you do have questions, definitely feel free to type them in the chat box, and I will answer questions from folks who have them. So anyone with questions? This is kind of a short session because we do have the student Q&A, which, like I said, I will send out to people. The other sessions, so the other workshops are going to be longer. The other ones will probably take a full hour. So this one is kind of only a half an hour, but in the future they are going to run longer. All right, it seems like there aren't questions, so thank you everybody for coming, and I look forward to seeing you throughout the year and to working with you. And make sure to breathe, and definitely look over your self-assessment. And I'll send out more information about our next sessions and about the student panel, what they said. And so, yeah, I look forward to talking to you all soon.